All right. Hopefully, I'll be finishing up Mass Effect 3 today. Everyone's favorite ending for a video game trilogy ever. I actually didn't mind it that much myself, but I also didn't play the original. I played it once the additional endings had come out. So I didn't have to worry about the weird ending where there was no credits or anything like that. And you got in here fast. I'm already on the last level, so although it's funny because you think you're on the last level, so you're like, oh, I can wrap this up in like half an hour. But it still takes like probably about an hour and a half. And that's assuming you don't have any issues dying and that sort of thing either. But I think the first thing I want to talk about is the Halo show. Because the Halo show got canceled. Obviously, if you're a fan of mine, you're probably happy. And if you're here, I'm assuming you're a fan. But I do see a lot of cope online of people talking about like, well, maybe Amazon will pick it up or HBO or somebody who has more money. Like they'll pick it up and continue it, because there's so much potential there and the brand is so strong. And I made the video pretty much right when I first found out. Hey, what's up, Tyler? I'm talking about the Halo show getting canceled right now and the coping mainly on Reddit and Facebook, Instagram. People think that HBO or Amazon or someone is going to buy it or Netflix and then just continue the show as it was. And I just don't see that happening, honestly. I think it's much more likely that someone buys the rights on the condition that they can either reboot it or, they can either reboot it or start it over completely or do a movie. Because at this point, the studios, I guess they're just never going to learn the lesson of, you don't buy a brand and then change everything about it and then wonder why people don't like it. They are shopping it around, but I wonder how long that'll last before they just say, okay, like we're giving up completely. And then you see weird posts too that never have any links or sources. Shocking that Reddit might be unreliable. But people post that season 3 was already written before season 2 ended. It's just a matter of getting production back. Like none of these people take into account that, they do these shows one season at a time. No one is writing an entire season script unless they got paid already. I'm not saying that that couldn't have happened, that maybe Paramount was like, look, we'll pay you in advance for a season 3 script. But people also don't seem to acknowledge that Paramount has all the access to the actual numbers. So we get everything, through a third party. Tyler says that he's glad they canceled it so I don't have to torture myself. I think the Halo season 2 is probably the best thing for my channel. I think I got like 250 subscribers during that time, which at the time I had like 400. So that was like half my channel or, increased by half. But Paramount has all the numbers. So if their numbers were leading them to think like, we're going to drop this show, it's really hard for me to imagine they started paying people for a third season in advance. Maybe there's some kind of loose outline just so that, 343 can make the pitch for a season 3. But I don't believe for a second that season 3 is already written and just waiting to be produced. And that doesn't even include people like who they had to renew their contracts and stuff. Pablo Schreiber, who plays Master Chief, maybe he's tired of it. of just getting shit on every single day on the internet. And he's got other TV offers and stuff. I have no idea. I mean, I know he's been in other shows, obviously, but like all those logistical things have to happen for it to get a season 3. And even if all of that happened today, which I said in my video, the earliest you'd be looking at season 3 would be 2 years from now. That's the absolute earliest. And I just don't see why any studio would do that. Like, not only do you have a show that is trending down, right? Like, I talked about this a lot in my ratings videos, but if you didn't see them, the ratings, yeah, I did see that post where he tried to do the Master Chief line. He's a douchebag. I think that's actually what I put on screen in the video to talk about how much of a douchebag he is. But so the ratings, I don't think people really understand how bad the sort of how bad the ratings actually were getting. And this is all just kind of inferred from what we know because we have super limited access, right? But the ratings we're getting that we know of is that it had the most viewers for any Paramount show for season 1, episode 1. It had over 5 million viewers in like less than 24 hours. We had no idea how many that was. At the time, the Paramount Plus subscription base was roughly 40 million people. Now, well, I don't know how much has changed like right this second, but when the season ended, it was like between 70 and 75 million subscribers. So their subscriber base doubled. And from my estimates of the minutes watched, I was being super charitable and trying to give them the benefit of the doubt. Like every person that turned it on only watched the newest episode and they watched the entire thing in full. And even with the math that I was doing, you were looking at maybe 5 million people. So even just right there, if they had the same amount of watchers as episode 1, which it's actually less, and the subscription base has almost doubled, that's a massive drop off. And then I was being super charitable. I think that their viewership was probably much, much lower than I was estimating. But then there's also the aspect of how much is the Halo brand worth right now? Like, yeah, the games will essentially print money when they come out once every 5-6 years. And they'll, try to bend everyone over with microtransactions to get their payday. But Infinite was a bomb on the brand. And you combine that with the show where they pretty much just came out and insulted the fans repeatedly. They did all the typical, you don't like, don't watch. If you want it to be canon, it's not. We're going to say it's not canon, but then pull a bunch of shit from canon and just surface level stuff. We don't understand it just to try to get the fans in. They did all the typical corporate fuck ups that you see. They did all of them. So the Halo brand right now, culturally, is just completely irrelevant. Like, I don't ever hear anyone talk about Halo in just day-to-day life, like for sci-fi. And depends on how old you are, you might remember, people used to line up at midnight to buy the Halo games. He was on Mountain Dew cans. He was on everything. Like at the Xbox announcements, he was like the Master Chief was the big keynote draw. Hey, what's up, Mr. Divine? So I think when you take all that into context, the likelihood of another studio continuing this show, every day that we don't hear it, it gets less likely. Because even if they do it, like I said, there's a lag time in writing and production and actually getting it released. And I think what you're starting to see, hopefully, is that these streaming services are learning like, hey, we can't put a season out every 2 or 3 years for a show, or it just becomes irrelevant. I mean, I know there are some exceptions, like Stranger Things. I know House of the Dragon took a year in between. But I'd be shocked if they did that for season 3, assuming it gets one. or assuming the story needs one. So when you're talking about a show that's already trending down, the brand is culturally irrelevant, even if they can make money off of it. There's not like a ton of word of mouth about Halo, and certainly not good word of mouth. Like, who's going to do that and then have a 3-year gap for a season 3 on a show that no one wants? So my hope would be that, you know, Warner Brothers or like an actual studio says, hey, we will buy the rights to Halo, but we want to do a movie and make it canon, or a show and make it canon. And then they can actually tie it into the lore. And it's crazy that you have these people, I'm assuming their profit shares as CEOs of these big ass studios is like, you know, tens of millions of dollars a year. And they can't make just basic common sense decisions. Like, if they put me in charge right now, I would say, okay, we're going to buy the rights to Halo. And we're either going to put, you know, $125 million toward a movie, or we'll put $100 million toward a show. And for the show, we're going to follow Master Chief. We're going to do 1 book per season. That's it. Like, if we need to introduce a couple characters to, you know, fill in some of the screen time to kind of flesh out the story so it's not just Master Chief mindlessly mowing down Covenant, you can do that. Like, I think it's very easy to imagine a scenario where you do the Combat Evolved game and then you just give him like a small squad of Marines and they all just die along the way. And if it's well written, you'll be sad when they die. And that doesn't even include the big deaths like Keyes and Jenkins and Silva and all that. And his vice captain, I can't remember her name, whatever she is, the second in charge. And to me, that just seems like if you're concerned about you're getting your minutes watched on your platform, it's hard for me to imagine that you wouldn't be looking at one of the biggest shows on any platform if they literally just followed the already existing story. And this is something else that I find, well, I'll be honest, I find it actually kind of gross because it pisses me off, but also just completely dishonest, is you'll see these people be like, I try to defend the show, and they do what all these fucking tourists do, is they can't say the show's good on its own. They'll try. But what they'll do is say, well, who wants to watch the story of a game you've already played? Just completely ignoring the fact that, first of all, if they did a 1-to-1 adaptation of Combat Evolved, the same people saying that would be sucking off the show or movie, just filleting the producers for sticking to canon and how good it looks and all the same shit. Like, I'm not even convinced that these people are completely real and they're not just fucking bots or interns paid by Paramount. But that aside, like, and the second point I was going to make is the gaming audience is like, there's obviously a big overlap between games and movies, but there's a massive number of people who don't play first person shooters. Maybe they didn't have an Xbox. Maybe they did and they played Perfect Dark or something instead. Like, there's a huge market there of people who are just generally into sci-fi, but didn't play Halo for whatever reason. So, like, that's the reason you do an adaptation that's faithful. I mean, maybe there would be some hardcore people who are like, oh, you know, it's a little bit boring because we already know the story. But even that, I don't know if I believe that. Because I talked about this before, but for whatever reason, people value TV and movies as just higher art than they do video games. They just do. Like they feel like it gives, like, going live action with the Halo story, they feel like it gives it more artistic merit or value. Even though it, like, cinematically, hey, like, if they don't change anything, Halo's still awesome. Like you can watch the cutscenes as a movie, and it's an entertaining movie. So I to me, it's really, really hard to imagine that some studio would continue this show. I won't say it's impossible because we see how much dumb shit they do in Hollywood all the time. Like I heard people bitching literally this week that this is the first time they've had Wolverine in his like comic book costume, and Wolverine's been popular for 25 years. I think the original X-Men movie came out in like 99 or 2000. Like, why did it take them 2 decades to get a costume right that is pretty iconic? Like, I mean, people loved it forever because they're stupid. So there could be some dumbass executive who's willing to say, like, look, we'll give you season 3 if you do these certain things that I want you to do. And they won't, they won't really care about it. They'll let 343 just continue to butcher the show as long as they get the parts in there that they want. So, I still say it's like 90% chance that it doesn't get picked up. And if I had my preference for a movie or show, I think a movie is the way to go. I really do. Because, you spend $100 million on a show, it might still look pretty cheap. Part of the problem is they hand these shows over to people who don't plan ahead, who don't seem to understand how to run a production. I mean, The Acolyte obviously is a great example of this. Where that $200 million went, who the hell knows, right? But, it just feels like it's like lining the pockets of the people at the top, and then you're actually getting like $50 million for the show. So I feel like with a movie, you're paying, they'd probably waste a bunch of money and spend like $200 million on it. But I think realistically, you could spend probably $120 million. I think that movie, The Creator, which I actually didn't see, but visually it looked good, was like $80 million. I mean, Dune 2 looked awesome. That was like 180. But I still think you could probably do it cheaper if you really wanted to. And I mean, they could just print money. Like you make a decent adaptation of the Fall of Reach book that, just follows the lore. If you want to include some of the game aspects, you could. But the fans would go crazy, and good word of mouth. You never know how much money that's going to make you also. Like if all the Halo fans are out there being like, oh my God, this movie is awesome. They adapted it so well. They hit all these important points. These parts were epic, blah, blah, blah. It's pretty reasonable to expect you'll get some normies in. And that's where like the real money comes from as far as these studios are concerned. Do you think it's lost in translation? Like I feel, for example, Wolverine looks cool in the comics and costume, but in live action, he doesn't as much. I think that's an element of it, but my guess is more that they wanted to look like grounded and trendy for the time. Because remember, like late 90s, early 2000s, and you're talking about stuff like, like The Matrix was in that time period. You had stuff like Blade, like all that leather and kind of dark, gritty look, or whatever you want to call it. That was sort of the trend at the time. I mean, I'm not really a comic book guy. I've never read any. I read quite a bit of The Walking Dead and then kind of gave up on it a while ago. But that's not really superhero comics. But I wouldn't be a huge stickler about like the details, the way that some of the hardcore altists are. But I think you can still adapt his general look in a cool way that works for live action. Because there is some stuff that just looks goofy. Like, it just does. And it's the same way that, a really good example of something that I thought was fine in animation, but looked horrendous live action, was that scene in Ahsoka where Ezra goes to jump across the chasm. So he force jumps, and then when he gets like to his peak, Sabine force pushes him. In a live action, it looked goofy as shit. But in the animation, I thought it looked fine. So I think there is definitely stuff like that. I don't know if costumes are really one of them. I don't think. Let me see. The Fall of Reach would be cool to see in live action. But with the Halo show failing, no studio would want to invest millions of dollars. Halo needs a lot of CGI to make it work. Well, that's the thing I was talking about with the budget is I think your money just goes, I mean, just straight up like dollars per minute, you're getting a lot more if you do a movie. So, I think that, shit, I ran the wrong way. I was looking at chat. So I think there's definitely, like you need the money, that's for sure. And they tried to mitigate how much they needed, by doing like the more drama side of things. But yeah, that's why I said I would probably prefer just a movie, because like if you want to have elites and you want to have the story, it's really hard to do that without a big budget like production. But I don't know, because like Game of Thrones, like this House of the Dragon show, I think the budget for that one was $100 million, and they're getting 10 hours, right? Like 10 hours of content. And from what I've seen, there's a shitload of dragons and sets and costumes and all that stuff. So I think if you can manage the money okay, you can make it work. And also, there is just a thing of, people will be more forgiving if the show's good. Like there's a lot of shows that the special effects are very meh if you're being charitable. But people love them because they love the characters and the stories and all that. I mean, Supernatural was on the CW. They're not shelling out all kinds of money. And that shit went on for 15 years of 24 episode seasons. With, demons and all that, angels and whatever. They went to hell a bunch. There's a bunch of fight scenes in like every episode. House of the Dragon, from what I've seen, you have the big ass CGI dragons like the entire time. So I think if you manage the money the right way, it can work. But I don't know if you even need that for a Halo story. Also, The Fall of Reach, if you're talking about adapting the book, remember, the first half of that story, 2/3 of that story, they are essentially just really in shape humans. Like they don't get the Mjolnir for a while and like run into the Covenant and stuff because they're dealing with other shit. So, I mean, I think a studio could make it work. I just don't understand where all their money is going more than anything. I mean, Godzilla -1 was what, $15 million? Obviously a ton of CGI and special effects and visuals. I mean, that shot of Godzilla chasing that little boat, people will show that shit forever. Like, I would love if there ever came a day where these big ass studios had to go to court and show where they actually spent money. Because I don't really think there's an excuse when you're getting at least $100 million for these shows to look the way that they do. But, if you're talking about, for instance, like the Flood book or like Halo CE, the game being adapted, I think that would be pretty tough. Even with $100 million, I don't know. I mean, they might be able to get away with being a little bit tricky with camera work and stuff. Because something they did in this show that it was a little peeve. I don't even know if I mentioned it in any of my videos. But What's up, Mayo? Mayo says the standard unit of measuring budgets should be how many Godzilla minus ones did it take to make? Yeah, Mr. Divine agrees that we're never gonna get to see their books. Well, and that, like, to me, that's why when you, like, people say it's unfair to speculate, we can see what their decisions are. And they're not basing these decisions off nothing, right? Like when they start changing out who the main characters are in the MCU, we see the box offices, we see the projects from Star Wars that get promised and canceled. So like, even if they say whatever, we can see what they're actually doing. And what I was going to say about the Halo shows, it was a bit of like a nitpick, but kind of a peeve to me, is they made the ring way smaller just so that they could show the curvature of the ring. So like if you look at like a still image of John when he's trying to get his dick wet with McKee, like in the background, you're seeing like the entire width of the ring and the curvature of the ring. And that's something that if you film it that way, that alone, like having the CGI ring in the background is going to be fucking massive on your budget. And you don't need to. Like when you're in the games, right? You can't see the edges of the ring. And you can only see you can only see the ring above you if you look up. So that's a shot you can do, you know, once or twice really quickly to show that you're not on a planet, you're on the inside of a big ring. And then just that alone, you cut out all that background CGI. Because a lot of Halo, right, just looks like regular places. That's kind of the whole point. Like a lot of it is just kind of in the woods. Obviously, you have the silent cartographer on the beach. You know, you have the Forerunner structures that don't really look like anything we have here. But to me, that's one of those things that, like, being creative, you can probably minimize the cost on that. Like if you think about like Gondor or Helm's Deep or something, obviously those places aren't fucking real. But because of the way they're shot and they use models and all that sort of thing, you can really cut down on CGI. So a smart person would do that, and like your money shots is where you'd spend the budget, you know, on CGI. Like that's where you want to, you know, you want to have Chief fucking up whoever and blowing something up. Maybe when he's driving away from the Pillar of Autumn, right? Or the Pillar of Autumn's exploding in the background. Like that's where you want to put your money. But there's no reason to do like a CGI ring and show the curvature of the ring in the background all the time. Or even really to show the edges of it. Yeah, I agree. Mayo says that CGI should enhance, not replace. Exactly. And especially something like Halo, where you can literally just go to a place that looks like it does in the games. Like the library level, or sorry, not the library, Guilty Spark. Go to a fucking jungle and film. Or not even in a jungle, just some thick woods. Shit, go down to Florida. There's plenty of swamps and trees. Or Louisiana or whatever. Like, you know, you have your beach scene, right? Pick a coast. Show them storming the beach. And then again, a lot of that stuff is interior. You know, with camera angles and filming the sets a certain way and lighting. They probably don't even need to build that much. I was actually watching the behind the scenes stuff for the show, and they said they built like, I want to say like 118 sets or something. Something crazy. And then you watch the show and you're like, where the fuck are the sets? Like the rooms that you see are all like these bleak hallways. You have like the suburban element, right? With the Fall of Reach that they did, where he's running around with Perez. You have like the one room that they show McKee and the Arbiter in over and over. And then you have like Ilaria, which is just an open field with one building. Like why did they build all these sets? Where the hell did they go? No, I know. I was being a little bit hyperbolic because Mr. Design says I feel like there's more to it than just showing up to location, like filming permits and stuff for CGI. No, I know, but I'm just saying I don't think it's a coincidence that we're seeing the budgets for like every movie just completely blown out, and then you hear the actors talk about it, and they're like, "Yeah, the entire thing was filmed in volume or whatever they call it, CG." And then you see, movies like Doctor Strange, Ant-Man Quantumania, spending $400 million to film. You see the same shit in the Star Wars shows, right? Like where you can tell that they're just on green screen the whole time. I just meant like if you want to film in certain environments, the Halo game it's a property where you can do it because they're designed to look Earth-like. That was my only point, is that you don't need to have, 2.5 hours of CGI just nonstop. But either way, the money is just being pissed away and we're not seeing it on screen. So, like, I agree that they would definitely need a substantial budget. A substantial budget to do it like a season of Halo. But I really think it comes just more down to managing the money. What are your thoughts on the Star Wars prequel? I believe they were filmed on a stage for the most part. And yeah, that's one of the biggest criticisms that they got is whether or not you think the technology was not advanced enough or it was just a bad choice artistically. That's like one of the biggest criticisms of the prequels. And that started as soon as they came out, with people being like, holy shit, and this entire thing is like kind of cartoony looking almost. And then it aged super poorly because, technology is going to keep getting better. And I think that's the other upside too of trying to not do just everything green screen, is how well it ages. Like if you look at, I don't know if any of you guys have like recently rewatched like Guardians of the Galaxy or even the second one. Those movies are, I think, like maybe 10 years old and 6 years old or something. And they already are starting to look like a bit rough to watch. And those are movies that had a big budget. A lot of people say that CGI peaked after Pirates with Davy Jones. Yeah, like that movie, I don't know if you've watched it recently. Davy Jones still looks awesome. And like the skeletons and shit. And the first one, like what was that, 2003, I think? Like all that stuff still looks really good. And yeah, that like you're kind of getting at what I was talking about, that it's really just a matter of using the money wisely. I don't think there's any excuse when we're seeing, like multi-$100 million budgets, many of which actually get like increased quietly later, by the way. Like people talk about The Force Awakens having like a $200 million budget. If you look at that Forbes article, I think it was like $550 million. Like, yeah, the movie looks good. There is no way in hell that movie should cost $500 million. Like, there's just no reason for that. I can only assume that okay, so there's two assumptions you can make. The cynical one is that the money is simply being laundered. And I don't think that's what's happening. I think that these corporations, because a lot of people will say, oh, it's the DEI hires. I think what it actually is, that these corporations do the thing where they're like, they want to keep hiring people so they can tell investors like the company is growing and blah, blah, blah. But there's not actually that much personnel needed. So then you end up with just these massive amounts of people that don't really do shit. So I think, eventually they'll be forced to cut down. Eventually they'll be forced to cut down substantially. And I think we won't really see a drop in quality. like, special effects wise and all that. Because I think there's a lot of people getting paid to do jack shit. It's so much better when the effects make things that shouldn't be real look real. Like, you don't want a movie to give you a headache. Yeah, I agree, Mayo. Like, I think that's what makes the Davy Jones thing impressive. Like, he looks like a talking octopus face monster. When we're talking about the movie budget, how much of that is going toward advertising? When you hear a movie budget, zero, because they separate the production budget and marketing budget. Middle management and DI is taking budget. Yeah, it definitely is. There's just way too much waste for what they're spending. So like normally, Mr. Divine, if they say, like Deadpool, right? They'll say that Deadpool had, are they saying $300 million budget is what they're saying? Either right now, Deadpool's about to come out in a week, and they're saying either $250 or $300 million budget. They've probably spent an additional, I would guess $250 million on marketing. I think the standard assumption now for blockbusters is like 150, but I think with Disney and Star Wars and stuff, it's pretty safe to go higher, like looking at 200, 250. So before your movies even come out, you're looking at needing to make what? Well over $1 billion. Well over. Like if you assume the studio is getting half of the box office, which it might actually be less, especially internationally, and you spent $500 million in your movie, you're essentially putting yourself in a position where every movie needs to make $1 billion. It's unsustainable. Yeah, iStat says that he didn't watch The Hobbit specifically because of the CGI. Wasn't that also filmed at like 60 frames per second or something weird? It was hard to watch. Like I remember turning it on and being like, "Whoa!" Like that's not an appealing look. Because it was like too smooth or something, and it gave it a weird like cartoony video game feel. Robert, oh my God, I'm butchering shit. Robert Meyer Burnett says, "You need to make me believe." Yeah. And that's what I was saying about the writing is people will forgive a lot of wonky CGI or, if there's a bad line delivery here and there, people will overlook a lot of shit if they like the characters in the story or even just the world. Like if you create a cool world, that goes a long way with people. I mean, shit, Star Wars has been riding a cool world for fucking 40 years. Because we haven't had a good story in a decade. And people are still defending that shit. Mr. Divine blames the studio for The Hobbit's rushed failure. I've heard that the studio was like kind of involved in that, but I've never heard the specifics. Or is that just like rumors and speculation? Because I don't know. I wonder what decisions the studio had impact on. Or if, maybe they gave Peter Jackson the keys and he just fucked it up. And there's plenty of directors that do well, early in their careers and then fall apart later. Happens all the time. I mean, people change with age and money and all that. I mean, Christopher Nolan is arguably the best director right now. And I think even the people who love him would say that he's hit and miss. Damn, Mayo got his Deadpool 3 opening night ticket already. You think it's going to make $1 billion? I don't think so. I said it a couple of streams ago. I think like 700 million, maybe 600. I mean, I know it's being super hyped up and the people that like Deadpool, like fucking love Deadpool. But yeah, that's what I just brought up to a couple of minutes ago, is that it took over 20 years to get him into the right suit. But the reason I don't think it's going to do what people are saying, obviously the fact that it's R-rated, it just hurts. Like, it just does. I mean, I don't know how parents are, but I would imagine there's a fair amount of parents that are like, I'm not going to let my 13-year-old go see an R-rated movie. You know, you can agree or disagree with them or whatever, but I would think that's a fairly common sentiment. But also, you know, the first two Deadpools, I think, made $780 and $750. And they came out, let's see, when did they come out? Maybe 7 years ago? Maybe like 7 years ago and then 5 years ago or something? 8 years ago and then 5 years ago, something like that. But that's back when, you know, the Marvel brand was going strong and kind of like peaking. And that's also when movies in general were just cranking out billion dollar movies. Inside Out 2 just hit 1.4 billion. Yeah, I know. Which is weird because I actually haven't really heard that much about it other than that it's been financially successful and it sounds like people liked it. That's what I mean. That's what I was saying about the R-rated thing though, is Inside Out is a movie that families can go see. And I don't think Deadpool has that going for it. Oh, what I was going to say though was the first two Deadpools, I think, ended around 780 and 750. And that was when the brand was strong. And that's also when going to the movies was commonplace. Like right before COVID, I think like 2019 or 2018, Disney had like 8 movies hit $1 billion in 1 year, which is crazy. In the last 3-4 years, how many have there been? I know there's been Mario and Barbie. Oppenheimer got close, but that was also kind of a cultural phenomenon. And then Inside Out, which is a family movie. Yeah, I mean, the podcast will be recorded and I'm going to leave it up. So, you know, I could end up being wrong and look like an asshole. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see it hit like 350 million worldwide this weekend. Yeah, Mayo says there's no messaging. It's just a good, wholesome movie. Yeah, exactly. I think that's kind of like what's lacking right now. But also, I think the fact that it's like one of the only ones probably gave it a boost that it might not have gotten, you know, 5 years ago when that was more commonplace to just have just good movies for families. But Deadpool, I wouldn't be surprised at all if we see it have a pretty big opening weekend, like 350 million worldwide, and then a pretty big drop off after. Because to me, I don't know if Deadpool is the type of movie that word of mouth is going to do. Oh, Avatar 2. Yeah. Yeah. Gonzalez. I totally forgot about that one. And those are another one that is so weird to me. Because those movies are like kind of the epitome of our culture now, which is like they fucking dominate the box office for like a month and a half, crank out $2 billion, and then just disappear into the ether. And then if you ever hear anyone talk about them again, there's not like a deep discussion about it. It's like, oh yeah, that movie made a lot of money. And that seems to be like all the people remember. It's so weird. But I was going to say that was, you know, I could obviously be wrong and look like a total asshole. It'll be recorded, so. But I've just seen, it seems like everyone thinks that it's just going to crank out 800-900 million easy. And I just don't know, because Deadpool to me seems like one of those things that the audience that it has is the audience that it has. I don't know, even if everybody who sees it loves it, I don't really know how much that does for getting more people to see it and like getting people who weren't going to see it or were maybe on the fence to go see it. It just seems like one of those things to me that I don't know. I mean, maybe I could be completely wrong about like the perception of Deadpool. I don't know. It's just hard for me to imagine. That's all. It's just hard for me to imagine it being like $250 million more successful than the two predecessors. I mean, they've been marketing the shit out of it though. And it sounds like it might just be a cameo fest, which I don't know if people want a cameo fest or they don't. Like I saw people were really excited about the Wolverine and Sabretooth thing. I know there's been speculation about, Henry Cavill showing up as some version of Wolverine or something. I don't know if that's been verified or if that's, just people being wishful. But I'll be honest, I'm also a little bit biased against the Deadpool movies because I'm just not a huge fan of Ryan Reynolds just being himself all the time. But the first one I thought was a decent movie. I think it gets kind of overpraised because of the shock value. Kind of like The Boys in season, The Boys as a whole show really. But season 1, it felt kind of like a new and fresh thing. And as it's gone on and that's worn off, people were starting to turn on it. And it's just weird to me that it took 4 seasons of that before people were like, oh, it's the same shit every season. But yeah, man, I guess we'll know in a week, right? How did Twisters do, by the way? Does anybody know? Because I don't, that movie had a decent amount of marketing, but I haven't heard shit about it. Let me look real quick while this cutscene's playing. So Twisters box office tracking. Oh, wow. 81 million domestic opening. Damn. So it looks like it's going to end up, at least just glancing at these articles, with a little bit over 100 million is what it looks like. I'm surprised. I really didn't expect much from it. Yeah, I was debating if I wanted to go see it today, maybe after I get done the stream. I just watched the first one again the other night. It's fine. It's a typical 90s movie. I'm not quite sure why that one resonated with people so much more than the rest of the 90s action movies. I mean, it wasn't terrible or anything, but you had your standard 90s stuff in there. Helen Hunt was traumatized by a F5 or whatever the fuck. So that's her life's work and blah, blah, blah. And they're going after the big one. I mean, everybody has seen that image of the floating cow. I mean, it did have a big cast, which I actually didn't remember when I went to watch it. It had Philip Seymour Hoffman in it, Bill Paxton, obviously Helen Hunt. The guy that plays Dewey from Justified, I don't know his real name. There's quite a few people in there that you would recognize. The main woman who was Bill Paxton was going to leave Helen Hunt for, she was in an episode of Seinfeld. She was the "Can you spare a square" lady. Yeah, Philip Seymour Hoffman, I feel like when you go back and watch old movies, he's in a ton of random shit that I guess I've just forgotten about over time. But now that I'm done probably making an ass out of myself about the Deadpool box office, did any of you guys watch The Acolyte? It seems like that show has been watched more through YouTube, reviews, than it actually got watched. I don't know if you guys saw this or not. I guess it depends on who you watch if they cover it. But The Acolyte wasn't even in the top 10 Nielsen ratings. Starting with episode 3 or 4, because the Nielsen ratings lag a month behind. So it fell off it just imploded viewership wise. Istad says it sucks that Ledger passed away in his prime too. Yeah. Yeah, he was a good actor. I mean, he did a pretty wide variety of stuff considering how young he died. Mr. Divine says he's only watched my videos on it. I can't remember who commented it. I think it was Hibocomer, the guy that got mad at me last week about my George R. R. Martin take. J.M. Gonzalez says, I think I've seen every second of The Acolyte, and I don't even have Disney Plus. I think it was Hibcomer in my comments said that something just that he was enjoying the videos. But I responded and I was like, it's the weirdest show because it's so vacuous and the characters don't have personalities. The storyline never really makes any sense at any part of it. Every character's motives are just all over the fucking place. Like nobody has any clue what they actually want. And because it's such an empty show, it feels like you end up with a lot to say about it, which is like the strangest thing because, you know, usually if there's a show that there's not much to, you're kind of like, yeah, it sucks, but there's not really that much to talk about. But this one is like so inept that it kind of circles back around to where there ends up being a lot to discuss. It's bizarre. And like that final episode happened. And I said it in that, I did that little video right before episode 7 about how the end of the Acolyte can't make any sense because of the way that they've written it. And pretty much exactly what I said happened in the last 2 episodes. But seeing it play out on screen, they actually managed to make it more inept than I thought they could. Like I was okay, you know, they'll do like one more fight. Soul's gonna die. Maybe OSHA will kill Manny Jacinto, and that'll kind of be the end of it, right? Like I thought in some regard it would just be straightforward, like straightforwardly bad. But because they do weird shit, like OSHA just flips into a Sith all of a sudden, and they want the Kyber crystal bleeding shit, which I still think is like just so edgelord and cringy. Even aside from the execution in the show, because they want to sneak Darth Plagueis in, because they sneak Yoda in, even though Yoda has no dialogue, they eviscerated his character. Like it's an astounding level of incompetence that actually makes their, like, increases the amount of discussion you can have, because it's like, I'm not even sure what to talk about first, because every second that the screen is on, something's getting fucked up. I think it's the worst show I've ever watched. Like Halo made me much, much angrier because, like, just emotionally, and so did Kenobi for Star Wars. But the Acolyte just, it's just fucking insane. Like people contradict themselves in singular sentences, which is wild. Like the like one of the lines that stuck out to me the most, that definitely everyone saw because it got pointed out a million times, was when Trinity says to the witches, "We have a right to test for Padawans, with your permission, of course." And literally, that statement makes no sense. But also the whole show can't happen if they just say no. Like, whole show's done right there. The mom says, "No, we're not letting them become Jedi. Please leave our home. See ya." That's it. It's fucking bizarre. And that kind of stuff is just rampant throughout the series. Like, it's just constant contradictions. None, oh my God, I'm not going to keep like reiterating it, but obviously none of the characters make any sense. No one ever reveals all the information in like a human way. Like the exposition, I try not to be too hard on exposition because everything needs it, right? That's just part of storytelling. But when it's good, you don't talk about it. But when it's like really bad, it's like, man, like it takes you out of a fucking movie. Soy boy face pointing meme. Look, it's Yoda. Yeah, exactly. And they made Darth Plagueis look like fucking Gollum. Which maybe I'm just like, I'm not visualizing correctly. But if he's still supposed to be immune, which I assume he would be, I don't know why they would change his race. That doesn't even look like what mutants really look like. They made him look fucking weird. Oh shit, I just got grenaded. Motherfucker. Let's see. What's up, LR? He says what the fuck they put Yoda in it? And then, do Disney understand that by doing this, they're losing billions of dollars in revenue? They probably don't need it, but still, they're putting woke BS over billions and billions of dollars. Yeah, that to me is the thing that, even if I think people like the kind of the shills that want to defend Disney will do is they're like, oh, well, they make however many billions a year anyway. Who cares if they lose a couple $100 million? But at the end of the day, they're answering to shareholders and investors. Like potential profit or like potential lost revenue is a massive deal to these corporations. God damn it. Son of a bitch. So that to me is more damaging than, like, yeah, if they lose $1 billion, do they really care? Probably not. But the people who are sitting there like, hey, we could have made $1 billion, which is a, net $2 billion difference. It's a big fucking deal. And yeah, if you haven't seen it, they put Yoda in the very last 2 seconds to have Vernestra, who's the one doing the cover up, which her cover up also makes no sense, by the way. EFAP actually pointed this out, and I wish I had noticed it from my video, that she could have literally just blamed the entire thing on Chimere and just not said that he was a former Jedi, and that would have resolved like everything instead of throwing Solo under the bus. And that's a really good point. And that's kind of what I was saying about the show, like makes less and less sense as it goes on, which is crazy. And yeah, so they put Yoda in at the very end to have Vernestra say, I have something I need to tell you, which essentially implies that either one, she's lying to him and Yoda's too stupid to realize it, or he's in on it, which makes him a lying sack of shit from the prequels. Like neither one is good, obviously. It's just, and what they're doing, and this is like what Disney's been doing with Star Wars the entire time, is saying, okay, well, we're going to say everything's not canon, but we know that people like these characters. So we're going to like put them in at the surface level to get the keys jangling. And then we're going to make our own characters give these characters the ideas. So we can give all the good ideas they had in the originals that we can't call, not canon. Now they came and they were inspired by our characters. So fuck you guys. And the fact that there's people who don't see this, who are big Star Wars fans, I just find it astonishing, frankly. They'll probably say it was Yaddle and not Yoda. I mean, it's just, right. I think I mentioned this in the video, but they did this with Darth Vader also, right? Like a big part of the original trilogy is that it seems like they're chasing after Luke and Leia, but it's actually a deliberate plan to let them escape so they can track them. Simple but a good plan. So what do? Well, they create the Kenobi show. Now Kenobi and Anakin fought again, which is absurd. So they can claim that they had the first reuniting of Darth Vader and Obi-Wan. And they trap Leia. Reva puts a tracker in her little toy and leads it to the base. And Darth Vader finds this and is like, oh, that's a good idea. I wish I had thought of it. So now he's the copycat of Reva because they're just going back in time, changing shit to whatever they want. And this is something that they've just been doing. And it's really annoying. Like, they decanonized the Darth Bane trilogy. And then they brought him into one little cameo of Clone Wars. So they can say he's canon, but then people will fill in the gaps for him with everything else that he's done. Obviously, if you guys have played KOTOR, they do this mind warping thing at the end of Acolyte, where they just wipe May's brain away, which is fucking crazy. They wipe May's brain away, and then that's obviously ripped off from KOTOR and Revan, which I guess is not canon, right? Like Revan is not canon anymore because he was in the Knights of the Old Republic game, and I believe an EU book there is called Revan, which is like his whole full story. So what they'll do is they'll give nods to that shit. The shills will defend it using the EU and then call you a fucking retard if you say, well, it's not canon, so who cares? I just can't stand the entire culture around what Star Wars is right now. And I don't really see it getting any better anytime soon, unfortunately. I'm just waiting to hear the OG trilogy reboot so they can fix their new canon. I've said this since Disney bought it, that the day that George Lucas dies, they will be announcing a fucking reboot. And you can bet your ass they'll make Luke and Leia like mixed race twins. Like they'll switch the roles so that Luke is the one getting rescued and Leia's the hero. They're going to do all the shit they've been doing and just annihilate it. We'll get like crazy choreographed fights, which, you know, that's debatable if you think that's better or worse. Because, you know, obviously Obi-Wan and Darth Vader are supposed to be really old in that one fight in A New Hope. And then Luke is supposed to be untrained. So, you know, and then obviously a lot of the limits were just technology and all that sort of deal. But yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all because George Lucas is what, like 80? He's not got much time left. I wouldn't be surprised at all if in 10 years we're seeing A New Hope again. And then they might even go further than that and reboot the prequels too, to try to line it up with all this new bullshit they've created. Like, I've seen people who are all like trying to be hopeful about, you know, if Kathleen Kennedy retires soon or, you know, eventually dies because she's also in her 70s. People are trying to be optimistic that Star Wars can get turned around. There is no turning it around. Like, not anytime soon. I mean, like the best that you're going to hope for is that Disney gives someone who is like relatively new to the industry, so they're not a big name, gives them like a little side project so they don't really care about it. They don't get too involved. And that person ends up being very competent. Like that's what it sounds like happened with Andor, right? I haven't watched Andor, but everyone's praised it and people have been telling me to watch it the last couple of weeks, like in chat and on different streams. And I think that's the best you can hope for, is that you get random projects from people who aren't a big name yet, but they are going to be in the future. And Disney doesn't really care about it. So they don't get involved. They don't tinker. They don't really worry about, you know, making them input whatever rules and quotas and all that shit. They just let them do their thing and it just happens to turn out well. But until they would have to have someone in to clean house. Like every person that says Dave Filoni is the guy, I just don't get it. I just don't. Like his formula has been the same, as far as I can tell, since Clone Wars, of just reference shit from the EU, twist it into whatever he wants. The characters that he creates are special, i.e. Ahsoka, Sabine, these type of people. Like Dave Filoni is not the savior. And like all these projects they've been going through, I bet he's had to give his stamp of approval on almost all of them. Like everyone wants to like make Kathleen Kennedy the fucking Palpatine of our world. And I think she's a buffoon, but you can't blame all of it on her when we're getting all this content and none of it's good. Like, do you think she's that hands-on? No, I think she's a fucking idiot, but she's not the one writing these stories. She's just hiring people. I think, yeah, LR says that he thinks it's already had its time, just like Halo, and creativity is pretty much dead. Yeah. And the sad thing is that even when something creative slips through, whether it's on, you know, Netflix or a movie or whatever the case may be, it takes no time at all before these corporations come in and are like, hey, we need sequels. I mean, even something like The Matrix, right? Like the first 3 Matrix movies, most people only like the first one. I actually like the second 2, even though I don't know if they're like, I wouldn't call them good movies, but I do like them. But the 4th movie was an abomination. I think even if you're not a fan of 2 and 3, 4 is like a different level of bad. Like it's just, it's actually the movie that made me start my channel. because I was on the fence about it. I mean, that fourth movie came out and I saw it in theater. I was so pissed off. I went and got a microphone and fucking recorded a video, which I haven't watched it since I made it. So I'm sure the quality of that is dog shit. But, yeah, I just like these studios in a lot of ways. I mean, I'm not going to always blame the studio because I don't like when people do that, but they do a lot of stuff that just really interferes with any kind of creativity. You see it on Netflix all the time too, right? Or really just pick a streaming service where, they'll have a good season or a kind of a hit show. And then the studios are like, we need more. And they get more involved and start tinkering and putting in whatever rules and, stipulations and blah, blah, blah. And then all of a sudden you end up with some show that people were like, yeah, I had one good season. And it just falls off a cliff. I mean, and the reason I say I don't like to always blame the studios is because creatives do plenty of dumb shit too. Like The Boys, as far as I can tell, they have complete freedom. And that show, to most people, has just taken a nosedive in the fourth season. I thought it was the second season, honestly, but whatever. I heard the studios wanted Matrix 4 and the directors didn't want to make it. And when they did make it, they had the meta message about studios. I heard that same thing, that the studio pressured them into making it. The thing that's a little bit weird to me about that though is that the movie definitely starts off with that message that you're talking about, right? Because I don't know how much you remember. I assume most people forgot that entire movie as soon as they left the fucking theater. But the whole first half hour of the movie was them bitching, was the people in the movie bitching that they were having to make a new version of the game because the studio demanded it. So none of that was subtle. It was very obvious what they were saying. But then the movie just goes on to do that thing. It goes on to be a knockoff version of the first one for another hour and a half. And just complete cringe. Keanu Reeves, I don't think ever even fights in that movie, does he? Maybe he has one fist fight with Agent Smith or something. But he never uses guns. He just uses that lame ass hand pulse thing. That lame hand pulse thing. And that was one of the worst things I've seen in theater. Godzilla X Kong, which I titled it was one of the worst movies I've seen in theater, was an atrocious movie. But that one didn't make me mad. I was just like, wow, this really sucks. But The Matrix, I was pissed off. The third Hobbit movie too. That's when I left the theater, I was like I feel like these theaters owe me 2 hours of my life back, along with the money. But yeah, I mean, man, I'm really curious to see what happens with shows like Arcane and Andor, where you can tell they did have creative freedom and then they became hits. Well, Andor, I would say, is at least well received. I don't know if I would call it a hit just because the lower viewership, but Arcane was for sure. And you just had to wonder if they're going to have freedom stripped away after they made one really good season. What else did I want to talk about? Oh, I think in the title I had I put this show called Failure Frame, and the actual title is a lot longer because fucking anime, right? They can't have a title that's less than 15 words for some fucking reason. I think the full title is Failure Frame, I became the strongest in this world with the weakest skills or something. And I wanted to talk about it because I think it's actually a good way to do a revenge story. And I think it's also a good way to do an OP main character that doesn't feel like, if you watch anime, and especially if you watch isekai, you've definitely seen a million shows with the OP character who has his harem and none of the fights are ever stressful. And it's just kind of like a self-insert power fantasy type deal. And this show, Failure Frame, I think what I like about it is it is a revenge story for sure. Okay, so I guess I should describe it before I start talking about the story. So this whole class of kids gets transported to this other world. They all get powers. They're supposed to be heroes. And their powers are measured by this ball thing. And he gets an E rank. So he has like no unique skills or anything. It's just, he has like the lowest level skills, which are like paralyze, poison, and sleep. And in this world, for most people, iStat says he really likes the premise. It just sucks that the budget's so low because they have to use a lot of CGI. Yeah, it definitely is a low budget anime, but the manga's good and the light novels are good from what I've read so far. So, if you're into source material, you can always go read it. Or if you don't mind bad CGI, you can just deal with it. But so this whole class gets transported. They get their hero ranks measured, and the goddess there like lives in this world, and essentially the Demon King resurfaces every so long, and she has to put him down over and over because he resurrects or whatever you want to say. So the whole class gets ratings, and he gets an E rating. So he has no abilities, like no useful skills. So in this world, paralyze, sleep, and poison, which is what he has, are all supposed to be super weak abilities. And they don't have very much range. So like no one actually even uses them, even though like everyone can do them. And obviously, because of the premise of the show and the title, when he uses them, they actually end up being effective. But the way that he finds this out is that the goddess says that the weakest person in every class that comes in gets cold. So she sends him to a dungeon that no one has like escaped. And he ends up, because his abilities end up being broken, he ends up being able to fend off the monsters and escape the labyrinth or the dungeon or whatever you want to call it. So then he ends up being obviously very leveled up and very powerful. But part of the reason I think the show works as an overpowered main character type story is he his ability still has limits. So it is broken in the sense that, when he paralyzes someone, it lasts until he doesn't feel like it. When he poisons someone, it lasts until they die if he wants it to. So in that regard, he is broken. But the ability itself, he has to say the word out loud, and it only has a range. In the manga, he specifies 20 meters. In the show, he just says, "Oh, he's not in my range yet," so you get some idea of how far he can use the ability. And fuck. And so his ability is broken, but there's limits to it, which I think is always a good way to create a powerful character. Because, outside of that, he's just a human. Like he's not like invulnerable, he's not invincible. He just has these broken almost like status abilities that he can use, and he can fuck stuff up if he can get close to it. But even then, like if someone's fast enough that they can get to him before he says paralyze, they can still kill him. Or if they just attack him from long distance, they can still kill him. And I won't spoil anything because he does some stuff to kind of like try to address these weaknesses later on, which I think are pretty neat the way that it's done. And even his counters have their own limits. Like it's not, he's not just suddenly a god or anything. So I think it's a really good way to do like an OP character in that regard. And as far as a revenge story, I like him because people have compared it to R. Ferretta. There are definitely similarities. R. Ferretta feels like much more of a self-insert to me. But, I feel like a big problem with revenge stories is you end up making your character like so vengeful that that you like kind of lose sympathy with them along the way. An example of this for me was Redo of Healer. Like, as the story goes on, you're just like, man, like, yeah, he is getting revenge on people that hurt him, but he is just a fucking asshole. Like, you don't want to root for anybody because it makes them all feel like pieces of shit. Or the other, issue that I think revenge stories can have is what we saw with the Acolyte, where they want revenge and they're willing to kill people, but it makes no sense. Like that seems to be like a recurring issue, I think, just in revenge stories in general. Or like there was some kind of misunderstanding or whatever. So then their revenge becomes unjustified. But another thing that I like that he does, the character in the show, is like he is on his quest for revenge, but he just kind of wants to like leave people alone as long as they're not pieces of shit. But he does run into people who are pieces of shit, and he's like, okay, fuck them, and he kills them. Like he's not, he's not like the character who just overlooks people being pieces of shit, or you get the like the talk no jutsu or whatever, where like he turns everyone to his side. When he meets people that he thinks are evil, he's like, okay, fuck them, and then he kills them. And then he uses some underhanded tactics too, because he wants his revenge, which I actually think makes him like a more relatable character. He's not some super heroic, like unbelievably good person. Like he's just a regular guy who wants revenge. And because he has the ability to kill evil people, he does. Like, I think that makes him seem like a very just like how a normal person would behave if they had that ability and that power. Kind of like Taken, right? Like I'm sure every guy out there has thought like, man, wouldn't it be badass if I could take revenge on a bunch of people and it was like justified? Kind of like that's kind of how I feel about this guy. He's very normal. He's like very relatable. And at least so far, it hasn't done, I'll be vague, but at least so far, it hasn't done the self-insert, every girl that he meets is immediately in love with him. He just kind of deals with people as they are. He tries to help out good people, and he fucking kills bad people. Like, very straightforward. And then the world itself is cool. Like the Demon King exudes these they call them, they have a word for them, but essentially like magical power. And the magical power that he exudes weakens the humans, which is why they summon the other worlders to begin with. And then it also like creates stronger monsters. So the closer you are to him, the stronger the monsters are that kind of grow on their own and that he can like create. So the world itself is also pretty cool. And then, there's the history of the nations that have conquered each other and have tried to like use these monster attacks to invade one another and all that type of shit too. Like just solid world building overall. But yeah, so if you're into anime, even if you don't normally like isekai, I think it's worth checking out at least the first couple episodes and just seeing what you think. Because I think it's a pretty neat take on sort of the overpowered revenge motivated character. And it's nice to see, like the isekai genre, like even though there's a lot of the stereotypical stuff of just the OPMC harem and he runs the whole world and blah, blah, blah. I'm glad to see that we're getting a lot of these type of spin-offs that are different takes on it. And not just like people who want to envision themselves as a hero with all the bitches. All right, well, there's the bulk of the game done. Now for everybody's favorite final opponent, Marauder Shields. But yeah, there's actually a lot of really good anime this season. I just watched the first episode of I think it's called Days with My Stepsister, which I think people have assumed it's something that, you know, it isn't. Ice Dad says that he thinks that the best series is going to be I Parry Everything. His ignorance of what's going on around him is my favorite. I'm not sure what my favorite of this season would be so far. I've really enjoyed Alia, sometimes hides her feelings in Russian. I've really enjoyed Failure Frame. I really like the Osan Rookie Adventurer. That one's really funny because that one is a premise where the guy is an adult and he's 32. He becomes an adventurer at 30. He just quits his job and he's super weak. And the strongest group ends up training him to death just over and over for 2 years. So then he ends up being like broken. So even though he can't use like mana and stuff, he ends up being super strong and like super durable. So that one's a pretty funny one. And then there's some that I can't tell what I think yet. Like, yeah, Ice Dad just mentioned Bye Bye Earth. That one seems like it could be really cool. It's only been a couple episodes, but you know, that's one of those things that it could be, it could end up being really cool, or it could end up just kind of going fucking crazy. Oh, so does Wisteria have a big budget? What is Wisteria just Wand and Sword, or is the full title Wisteria Wand and Sword? Either way. Yeah, that one is by the author who did Don Machi, or is it wrong to try to pick up girls in a dungeon? Has the same author as Wisteria. I've heard that Wisteria is okay, and that it's kind of like a less good version of, or like the characters are like less likable versions of Don Machi. I don't know. I haven't watched it yet. I saw episode 3 just came out today though. My Hero Academia is getting to the. Oh, it's okay. So it's Wisteria Wand and Sword. Okay. My Hero Academia is getting to its climax, or it's in the middle of its climax now. That manga is in the epilogue. It has 2 chapters left. The chapter today actually set up something that I wasn't sure if it was going to do or not, but I can't really say anything without kind of spoiling it. And also I could be wrong because it did the ending implies that something is going to happen of this second to last, or this third to last chapter, but it might not necessarily happen. What else have I been watching? Oh, the fight scenes are really good. Okay. Yeah, I keep seeing it and like debating putting it on, and then I'm like, maybe a little bit later. Oh, I just watched the first couple episodes of one called like Not Welcome in Another World or something. And it's about this guy who he seems kind of Edgar Allan Poe inspired to me. He's like an author in our world from a couple hundred years ago, or like I think the 1900s is what it says. And like the early 1900s. And the show starts off and him and his wife are going to commit suicide together, but then he gets hit by a truck and teleported to another world. And he's just like, I want to die. And like, that's his whole, it's this really morbid humor and very dark. Oh, Tyler says he had a long call, so he'll catch up in half an hour. Shit, I'll probably be wrapping up by the time you catch up, as long as Marauder Shields doesn't kick my ass too much. But yeah, this No Place in Another World or whatever, it's a really dark humor type of story, but it's pretty funny. He keeps just being like, I want someone to commit double suicide with me, and he thinks his wife might be in this other world with him. Yeah, Ice Dad says Truck Coon never fails. Yeah, you know what's funny is that I thought this was a really good joke where the elf goddess that runs this other world, like the when the other world has come to this other world, she's like in charge of them in the church, and she's an elf. And she's like, you didn't see a truck when you died? He's like, oh yeah, there was a truck there. He's like, yeah, she's like, yeah, that's one of our services. That's our world brings you to another world truck. And the truck chose you to come to our world. And she like goes like full blown into like the truck coon meme. It's got some decent humor. It's a weird one because the main voice actor is Levi from Attack on Titan. So he's pretty funny. Like his very dry delivery is good. But yeah, it's amusing. I just can't tell if it's going to be, I can't tell where it's going. My guess is that he's going to spend the whole time looking for his wife from our world or the original world. And the lesson is going to be, that he learns to enjoy and appreciate life. I'm assuming that's going to be where it goes. Because if the whole show goes to where he like helps a bunch of people and shit and then just kills himself, that's kind of dark. So we'll see. But yeah, there's a lot of good shows coming out this season. I watched the first couple episodes of 2.5 Dimensional Seduction. And that one's like I think it's going to end up being like kind of a less interesting version of My Dress Up Darling. Like, I think the reason that My Dress Up Darling is so popular, besides like the fan service and all that, is that, the characters are pretty well executed. And this 2.5 Dimensional Seduction seems to me like it's just going to be a shitload of fan service. Like the first 3 episodes are out, and that's kind of the vibe that I'm getting. I mean, he's already got like 2 very attractive girls that it seems like they like him. And he's just a big fucking nerd. So the premise of this one is he ran the manga club at school, and it kind of implies that he was so obsessed that everyone else left. So it's just him. And then this hot chick shows up and says that she wants to cosplay as this character that he's obsessed with. And she wants him to take pictures because she doesn't have any friends. Essentially, she has no other friends to talk about this character with. So that's kind of like how they set it up. But then like the second episode, right away, you see that he had a childhood friend that liked him. Oh shit, I'm about to get fucked up. You see he had a childhood friend that liked him that ended up becoming a model, obviously, because, it wouldn't be a self-insert if, the premise is fan service. Yeah, exactly. And obviously it wouldn't be a self-insert if one of your harem wasn't a model. So then the model joins his high school to try to win him over. So she agrees to start doing these cosplays with them. And you can imagine what all the cosplays look like. It's, girls in essentially thongs and just straps to cover their nipples and all that. Like the typical anime fan service shit. There we go. That fucker will get you if you're not paying attention. So even, that's what I was saying, is 2 episodes into the show, he's got like the super hot chick with no friends who just strips in front of him all the time because she wants to cosplay. And then you've got the other girl who's a literal model in the story who's also in love with him. And she was actually mad at him because he was so obsessed with his manga and stuff. I'm imagining that there'll be more who join. I mean, that's kind of usually how it goes, right? But yeah, so, if you're into fan service, that one's probably for you. I mean, it definitely just seems to me like the fan service. Well, My Dress Up Darling has fan service, but this one seems like it's almost relying completely on it. And it's not going to take itself very seriously. But yeah, the I parry everything one I think is interesting. Because that's another one where he's overpowered with one specific ability. And obviously his ability is he can parry anything. So people think he's really strong, even though he failed at like all 6 of the schools they have to train in different abilities. Like he had no skills at any point. He just trained every day on parrying because that's all he could do. And that one, it's actually based on a light novel. I read the manga, but the manga isn't very far yet. My guess is the manga is like maybe in the second light novel, maybe the end of it. And I can't tell how long the shtick is going to last. Because in the Osan Adventurer one, he's also ignorant to start, but he does figure it out, that he actually is stronger than he realized. He was just trained by people who were like crazy strong. So, that's one of those things where it's like, how long can that last and still be funny before it's just like annoying? And I'm not sure yet for the I parry everything one. Really, what? That I find it annoying? I mean, eventually I do think it's annoying. Chapter 1 and 2 or episodes 1 and 2 for the I parry everything one. I mean, I'm just guessing because you know how it is with those light novels when they start the manga, like the manga translation or whatever you want to say. They, at least from what I've seen, they usually do monthly, and then because they can crank out light novels so fast, the monthly mangas like never catch up, or it would take like 25 years for them to catch up. So the manga that as far as I could tell, was only on chapter 17. But story-wise, I think it would be a good spot for it to end the season. Although, I mean, you might be right that it only covers like the first light novel. That's one of those things I haven't bought it to read it. So, it's one of those things that you don't know how fast they can translate it until you see the writing style for yourself. Like 86, the first core was only one book, and the second core was books 2 and 3. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, without like spoiling anything, because just of where the story is, there's some pretty big fights. The manga will be through season 1. Just because the story is, and like, there's a lot of big fights. That's one of those things that if they drag out how the fights go, then the manga might not even get covered in season 1. But if they do stuff at a fairly normal pace, if they get through at a fairly normal pace, then I think it'll probably pass where the manga is right now, or like, when the next couple of manga chapters come out, they'll be in the same place by the time the season ends. Because obviously the season has 2.5 months left or whatever. And I'm not even sure if it's in the second light novel. I'm just guessing based on like the story structure. That's how it seems to me. And usually, I don't know how many light novels you've read, but usually each light novel has like a focus for just that book, even though the story continues. So like Shield Hero, for instance, the first light novel covers up to where he has the duel with the Spear Hero. And shit, and Raftalia like comforts him. And the second light novel covers kind of like them getting more powerful, and like the stuff with Philo. And the third light novel kind of introduces Melty and covers her stuff. Zero, fuck them. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so I'm just guessing, because like the focus of the story, after a few of the manga chapters, maybe chapter, I want to say like 9, maybe 8 or 9, shifts to like another character in the world who seems like they're going to become a main character in the story. So that's why I said it seems like it's like the manga right now is like near the end of the second light novel, is like just guessing from what I can tell. And then the show, I think we'll get through 2 light novels because there's a pretty big, like, dramatic fight, you know. And you know how they are with that shit, where they want to like have a big fight be the end of the core or the season. And if they do get to that fight will absolutely take up at least a whole episode. It could be even more. Sword Art Online did their structure abnormally, right? The first 3 books and the whole Aincrad shit, and the next 3 are side stories shown in the anime. So I read the Sword Art books shit a long time ago at this point, probably 10 years ago at this point. But I think Sword Art was structured weird, because in the book, from what I remember, you see like the first couple episodes of Sword Art obviously are the first couple of chapters of the first book, but then the book jumps and it goes to the part where he's working with Asuna and like their group, and then the first book actually gets to the part where they escape Aincrad. So then the second book, it actually goes back in time to fill in other stories. So the show reordered it so that everything was chronological, because obviously it wouldn't make any sense for the show to have everything done in 4 episodes and then go back and show random side shit. And then I think after the second or third, no, I think it was after the second book, then the third and fourth book were the second half of season 1. So that one was just, it was in order after the first 2 books, because I guess the author didn't know that he was going to get whatever publishing deal that he got to keep writing the story. That's how it seemed to me, at least. Like, I don't even know if is it called Rudolph or Reindeer or whatever, that sad ass episode in Sword Art, like the third one. I don't even remember if that was in the first book or the second. But I know like the murder mystery was in the second book. There was another one that was in there too. I can't think of right now. Oh, I think the stuff with Elizabeth, the armor chick, the smith. I think that was also the second book. So like the second book ended up being like kind of all the side shit. But then they just put it back in chronological order based on how powerful he was and based on like what floor they were on and all that type of thing. So, but yeah, I mean, generally speaking, you know, I feel like your average like action light novel. Oh, Sasha, yeah, I can remember her fucking name, yeah. But generally, your general action novel, I would say you're looking at covering 3. Fuck you, Asuna. I would say generally you're looking at covering about 3 light novels in one core. Like I think Mushoku Tensei is pretty standard in that regard. But then, depending on the writing styles, it's just hard to say. Like Shield Hero, I really like the writing style because a lot happens in each book. So like the first season was 25 episodes plus the first episode was 45 minutes, like 26 episodes, but it only covered 5 books. And even then, they actually had to cut some stuff out. So, you know, but then you get stuff like the rom-coms in general, like The Angel Next Door Spoils Me Rotten and all that. That one covered 4 books because the way the shit was written, you know, you get a lot of inner monologuing and a lot of feelings and all that type of thing. Toradora is a good example of that too. Toradora, that whole series was 10 books and it got covered in 1 season. I mean, obviously you can tell the end is a bit rushed, but I actually didn't even finish the light novels. I think I stopped at book 6 or 7 because the Toradora writing style was just so like, it's just, what was his name? Ryuji? Just, it's so much in his head and he's describing fucking everything and he just goes on and on about his feelings. So like action wise or like plot wise, there just wasn't much happening in each book. So I should read Melancholy of Suzumiya Haruhi. What is that, a light novel? I feel like you've mentioned it to me before. But I don't remember what it's about. Also, about the Mass Effect ending that was mentioned earlier, I was like, you know, you're on the last level and you think like, oh, I'll knock it out in like half an hour. And it's going to take me just over 2 hours because all of this stuff is stuff that you can't skip through. The first season of the anime was so out of chronological order and is just confusing. You know what series I feel like would have been a good series, but I feel like without having read the light novels, I feel like they fucked it up, was Unnamed Memory. I enjoyed the show, but between episodes, I felt like I like missed an episode or something. Like, what the fuck is happening? Oh, yeah. iStat says that Melancholy of Suzumiya one has the endless 8 for season 2, whereas the repeated same episode for 8 episodes. I didn't realize that was the same one. Yeah, I know that's a bit of a complaint with ReZero too, but at least ReZero, he learns something every loop. Even though all the loops are really similar, obviously. But I'm really hoping, at least story-wise, that season 2 will be like the most repetitive. Because season 3, I don't think will be very repetitive at all of ReZero. And I think that'll be the best season. But then the season 4 one kind of does go back into being a little bit repetitive. It's not excessive, but it's definitely a tricky way to try to write a story where you have the same events happening slightly different, but over and over, and you don't want it to feel like repetitive or like miserable to watch it again. Of course, I say that, and the Acolyte managed to give me that feeling with only 2 episodes. The Acolyte had 2 flashback episodes, and the second one, it must have been 75% the same as the first one. And it's like, okay, well, I learned almost nothing, and the stuff that I did learn fucks up the story. How do I know season 4 is greenlit? Oh, for ReZero? Oh, I'm just assuming. I mean, it's on book like 35 or something, and it's still getting a ton of sales. So I'm just guessing that it'll be greenlit. I guess I should have specified the stuff that would be in season 4. I think is a little bit repetitive. I mean, it's not terrible, but there's definitely some parts where you get a little bit frustrated. Yeah, I know you're always being a dick. I'd rather stare at the wrong end of a donkey for 45 minutes than have to sit through one of those Acolyte episodes again. Yeah, the Acolyte, man. Whew. And, you know, people. Yeah, it's funny. The Acolyte had a lot of problems that I think the other Disney Star Wars shows have had. Where like every episode, you're like, oh, there'll be an explanation for this thing later, and whatever explanation you get, well, first of all, you might not even get one, and second of all, even if you do, it ends up being dog shit. Like that's been kind of the theme of these Star Wars Disney Plus shows. But I feel like people have just accepted it because they've managed to jam enough cameos in. You know, like when you jam Hayden Christensen into Kenobi and Ahsoka, obviously Kenobi also has Obi-Wan. Boba Fett season 2 was a complete cameo fest. So the Acolyte to me was really just the first one where they didn't have the luxury of cameos. iStat says, I've not seen a show get shit on that hard almost universally in quite some time. Yeah, it is crazy because that's what I was trying to say earlier in the stream is it's hard to describe how it just gets worse as it goes on. And then you're always like, well, surely this is the worst part of it, right? But then it just continues. Here, let me run to the bathroom real quick. You guys can listen to the Star Child explain the catalyst to Shepard. The game audio doesn't work. Oh shit. It's saying that it's working. Is it just quiet? I can turn it up for you if you want. So it'll be as loud as me now, I think. I tried to keep it low so you wouldn't be hearing the explosions and shit while I was talking. I can't skip through some of the dialogue. Thank Christ. Now I'm echoing. All right, well, fuck you. Whatever. I'll just go back to how it was. Leave it quiet enough to not be heard. Yeah, I turned it down, but you guys are probably lagging a few seconds, so you'll hear it in a minute. Double the filthy casual. Wonder why it echoed. Oh, maybe. I don't know why. I don't know why it would echo because it doesn't get louder on my monitor. It just gets louder in OBS. Oh, whatever. It doesn't matter. What were we just talking about? I got sidetracked. Oh, Acolyte. Yeah. So like Mandalorian season 2, I thought was not very good, but they had so many cameos that season. They brought Ahsoka in. They brought in Bo-Katan. Who else did they bring in? They brought in Oh, Luke Skywalker was the big one. 1 year of Velma on endless loop, or 1 year of the Acolyte. I actually haven't seen Velma because I only heard bad things about it. But it's really hard for me to imagine it's worse than the Acolyte was. Although it could be more cringe. I mean, or a different type of cringe. Because I know Mindy Kaling based Velma on herself. And then they turned Shaggy into like a stoner black dude, right? And then was Scooby a black chick or something? That was some weird shit they did. I don't understand any of that. That's another one of those things that got greenlit for season 2 before season 1 even aired. Velma is honestly more entertaining and it's horrible. Istad says that he read that the Rental Girlfriend mangaka has a second series he's been doing and it's getting animated. I wonder if it's another rom-com. I would be curious to read the first couple of chapters of it just to see if his writing style is that horrible all the time or if he's just doing it to milk the audience for Rent a Girlfriend. I actually saw the Rent a Girlfriend subreddit pop up the other day in my feed, and it was somebody complaining about his writing style. And I was surprised. A lot of people actually agreed with him in the thread. It's an incest rom-com. Wonderful. I mean, if Rent a Girlfriend added incest, might be the only thing that could make it worse. But I was actually surprised on the subreddit the other day. You know, the guy was explaining who posted, like, you know, his writing style has always had a little bit of this aspect of Kazuya. Damn, Tyler got caught up before I ended. His, you know, essentially his writing style has always had a little bit of this inner monologue shit, but the story was progressing, the relationship was developing, and then he started just, to drag it out like down the road and start on the character resets and the plot resets and all that, which I think is interesting. I would have to reread it to see if he actually changed or if at some point you just get tired of it. But there's not a chance in hell that I'm going to reread 250 chapters just to get caught up to the point that I don't like. Tyler says, I want to use my monthly request to have you watch Andor for July or August, because I still haven't watched Gravity Falls yet if you want to change it. I actually haven't watched any of the requests this month, which I was going to do this weekend, and then I'm starting a new job tomorrow, so I was getting ready for that. But I'm going to watch the stuff that was requested throughout the week and probably get the videos up by next weekend before the month ends. Because what I have right now is Taxi Driver from Jay, Band of Brothers from Bear the Dog. He used 2 months for that. And then as of now, Tyler has requested Gravity Falls. But if you want to change it, that's fine. Or if you want me to do Gravity Falls this month and then Andor next month, I can also do that. Yeah, and Istad still owes me 2 months of request. Okay, so you want me to change from Gravity Falls to Andor? That's fine. Because I'll be honest, Gravity Falls I'd never even heard of. And I saw it was another kids show because I found it on Disney Plus, and then I just ended up getting distracted with real life shit and never started it. That's fine. I can watch Andor. I think Andor is 15 episodes, but they're only like 20 minutes each or something, so it's not a big deal. Could probably crank through them in 2 nights after I get off work. And then Istad still needs to let me know. Which I'm not sure why you're undecided. I thought for sure you'd pick something. Yeah, it is. Band of Brothers. ISAT asked if Band of Brothers is the one with Ross from Friends. Yeah, he's like a military. He's a sergeant or something. Oh, Andor was only 9 episodes? Huh. I thought because they aired 3 to start that it was longer. I guess not. Well, either way, it's not a problem. I mean, the biggest complaint that I heard about Andor was just that people thought it was a bit slow. But I think beyond that, it's gotten pretty good feedback. And plus, Andy Serkis is in it. I like him a lot. All right, well, we're at almost 2 hours now. Mass Effect, this is just the final cutscene just playing out. So I'll probably start wrapping up here. Oh, you son of a bitch. Fucking internet. Okay. I saw I got disconnected there for a second from the fucking internet. I paused the recording so that little gap won't be in there. But let's see. iStat says, yeah, I've seen clips of it. Wasn't sure if it was Band of Brothers or not. I'll have to give it a shot. People love it. Yeah. iStat, Bear the Dog has been recommending it to me for like 2 years. And it's just one of those war things where I feel like you have to be in a specific mood to watch a war series or a war show. Because people are going to die. It's going to be depressing. So I just never, every time I considered it, I was like, eh. And then just went with something else. Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, Tyler says, I got cut off talking about Andor. Yeah, so the biggest complaint I've heard about Andor was just the pacing. Like, people just thought it was slow. And I was saying that Andy Serkis is in it, who I really like. So yeah, I mean, hopefully I'll enjoy it. Well, I was also saying I'm going to start wrapping up now. This is the final cutscene for Mass Effect 3, obviously. It lasts about 10 minutes, so I can just kind of sit here and chat for a second, but it's been about 2 hours at this point, so I don't know. What? Oh, the stream just ended. Okay, well, the stream got ended. So I guess this will just be in the recorded version, which is really annoying. But I was wrapping up anyway. There's not much to say. I've been talking for 2 hours. So yeah, I'm starting a new job this week. I don't know what videos I'll be making yet, since I don't know what videos I'll be making since Acolyte's done. Not really any movies coming out that I feel like talking about. I'll probably make one for Deadpool. And yeah. So what I was saying was, yeah, I'm going to wrap up anyway. Video wise, I don't know what I'm doing next because the Acolyte's done. I'm starting a new job, so I just don't know how much energy I'll have when I get home. I do plan on seeing Deadpool next weekend, hopefully Wednesday or Thursday, so I can get a video out for that one. And then I kind of fell behind because I was working on other stuff and figuring out my job situation and all that sort of thing. So I'm going to wrap up here. Yeah, that's kind of it. Not much else to say.